us in the station," Blake said under his breath. "Let's get out of here and I'll tell you everything. First, though, I need to shower. Being in a cell for 2 days was gross." Crystal threaded her arm through his. "I can't imagine what you went through, but I'm glad they released you." "Yeah, me too." The 2 days in jail had given him time to think, and Crystal wasn't going to like what he had to say. Blake had met Crystal when she came to work as a teller in the bank he managed, and he'd been instantly taken by her sweet nature. Because she was a tiny, take-charge brunette with a killer body, he'd asked her out the first week. She'd accepted, and the rest was history. Being a dragon shifter, he should have waited for his mate before dating someone. But after 100 years, he was tired of being on edge, always wondering if she'd ever appear. It got to the point where he wasn't sure if mates even existed. At least, not until he had met Greer. It was unfortunate that he hadn't met her under better circumstances, like before he'd kidnapped her and all. Now she might not give him a chance to see if they had a future. When he'd been almost mortally wounded, Greer had helped heal him. That was when his whole body had come to life for the first time. It was possible that because the dark entity Greer referred to as mange had taken over his body, that it had tainted his response to her. He'd been hoping that when he saw Crystal again, his old feelings for her would surface. But they hadn't. He dropped a hint about wanting to marry Crystal, but now he wasn't so sure. His indecision had run rampant when he was in jail. He couldn't just break up with Crystal, though, without knowing for sure whether he and Greer were meant to be together. While dating for 6 months wasn't a real long time, being with Crystal had become comfortable, so much so that he thought it might be time to make it permanent. If he and Crystal had split, it would devastate her. The poor woman had more or less been abandoned as a teenager when her dad had killed her mom when Crystal was only 17. Thankfully, once her father had been imprisoned, she went to college and never looked back. He felt terrible that Crystal, a human, looked up to Blake as her hero. If only he could be sure she'd move on if he told her he wasn't ready to settle down with her, now or ever. Blake would approach Greer faster than water evaporated on a hot day. "Did they feed you okay?" Crystal asked. With such sincerity, his guilt surfaced once more. It took a moment to focus on her question. "The food was okay. I was still healing from everything, so I really didn't care what they gave me." She wrapped an arm around his waist and led him to her car, acting as if he were an invalid. He slid into the passenger seat while she walked around to the other side. "Do you want to go to your place or mine?" she asked, with such innocence. The way she said it implied she believed he'd want to make love with her, which was a reasonable assumption. While he had been injured, he had healed. "My place. As I said, I have to shower." He adored Crystal, but after what just happened, he wasn't about to run down to the jewelry store and buy that ring. Not when his dreams had been filled with Greer's face. The whole thing was absurd, though. He and Crystal were perfect for each other. They were both into finance, both loved to run in the mornings, and they each really enjoyed seafood. It was a perfect match, or so he believed, until he'd met Greer. Then everything in his life turned upside down. For now, he'd pretend, or sort of pretend, that everything was back to normal with Crystal. Before he told her he wanted to reevaluate things, he needed to see Greer again. If nothing else, he had to make sure she really was his mate. Now healthy, his dragon would let him know if they were fated for each other. "Steve told me that something took over your body?" "Yes. I can't even imagine what that was like." Crystal fired up the engine and pulled onto the road once the traffic cleared. Blake really didn't want to talk about those few hours, but Crystal deserved to know. He'd just leave out why he was in the jewelry store in the first place. "All I felt was a slight pain at first, followed by a mind-blowing explosion."